Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. So today we turn to what's chapter 25. It deals with reputation protection, mechanisms how firms protect their reputation, and the concept of predictable prices, why predictable prices are necessary sometimes. What this chapter is all about is a follow-up on what we did last week, which deals primarily with how real-world situations facing entrepreneurs and producers and consumers, employees and employers depart from the simple supply and demand models of competition that we analyzed thus far. How sometimes the real world dictates kinds of behavior that might look strange or even inefficient or sometimes even manipulative, which at a closer look, when you analyze it more precisely, correctly, are completely normal and consistent with our simple models of competition. So here we deal with the certain types of behaviors with which you are familiar already, that are necessary behaviors by firms and entrepreneurs that are necessary to deal with some of the problems of long-term repeated interactions. That's long-term interactions. And there are some 4 key concepts here that we're going to analyze that entrepreneurs' reputation. What is it? I'm sorry. Protection. It's early in the day and already. So reputation protection, predictable prices, and there are 4 concepts that we are going to be talking about today that the firms use to protect their reputation and to create conditions of predictability in their conduct, in their business. So the first is the brands. Brands or brand names. Franchises is the next one. Franchise. Franchises. Advertising. And finally, there's predictable prices mentioned here. Why predictable prices? Or let's say, let's put it this way, stable prices. So you'll see that the stable prices, and I'll explain in a moment or at the end, why stable prices are not a typical prediction of your simple supply and demand model. You would expect prices to fluctuate much more than we see them fluctuate in reality. We're now going to try and understand why is that. So what are the benefits? What are the reasons that the prices in most markets are much more stable, rigid, less fluctuating than you would have expected them to be, having in mind our definition of how prices are determined on the market and supply and demand. Okay, so let's start with the brands. One more thing before we continue. There are 2 main problems of long-term repeated interactions between business firms and consumers that have to be solved somehow or mitigated. They can never be fully resolved, but they can be mitigated. These problems are information constraint or imperfect imperfections, let's say. So that's one problem. So consumers do not have a perfect information about characteristics and quality of the products they buy. Business owners, entrepreneurs, firms do not have a perfect information about the demand conditions, what consumers want, how much, and so on. So these are objective problems, and we will see how these four practices help mitigate or reduce the problem of information imperfections. And the second problem is our old friend that we discussed last time, the opportunistic behavior. Opportunistic behavior. I'm using British spelling now. Let me be a good. Opportunistic behavior, which means taking advantage of your business partners, or consumers, or producers, or employees and employers. So how these my thesis that I'm going to try to illustrate for you is that these four types of economic behavior help also in this regard, reducing to some level opportunistic behavior. Now, what can you tell me? Let's start with the brands and brand names that you're certainly familiar with. What are the benefits of brands in economic life? Why people create brands? How brands are created and what are their functions or advantages?
Helps consumers recognize the company, the firm.
So consumers recognize the company. Okay, that's one element. Why is it?
Their identity.
Their identity. Okay. What do you mean by their identity? Examples.
The name, their image, likeness.
The name, image, whether they like it or not. What else? They associate certain characteristics of a product with this brand name or certain quality.
Yeah, brand loyalties.
Yeah, brand. So brand loyalty. So what is brand loyalty?
It's when the consumer is specific to that brand.
So likelihood that the consumer will not change product because of the attachment to a particular firm or brand. What is the economic benefit of having brands? For a firm, how do you create a brand? Is it costly? Is it costly to create a brand? What you need to do in order to establish yourself as a brand?
You'd have to sell something with whatever brand it is.
Yeah, you have to be successful in selling. What else?
Yeah.
You sell it tomorrow afternoon and you created a brand, is that correct?
You have to like form a logo, company name, all of it, and then that goes on the product. And then in a way, it's almost a form of advertising. People see the
So advertising. So any kind of advertising is costly. So you incur costs in order to create a brand. What else? Even more important than advertising. Can you create a brand? Are you likely to create a successful brand by selling good stuff in the next 3 months and then you start like...
You have to keep your quality consistent.
Keep quality consistent over time. A long period of time, keep quality consistent over time. So brands costs are quality over time. Sufficiently high quality and standard quality. Why people are attached to a given brand is that they know what they get. In order for consumers to be convinced that the brand provides, that brand is a brand indeed, which means that it provides a stable, fixed quality of product, time is necessary. Time is money, as Italians in Middle Ages and early modern period said. So all of these things are costly. Advertising is also costly. Now, what is the benefit then? Why would the firms then engage in all of these? Why would the firms be incurring all of these costs? What are the benefits on the other side of the ledger? What the branded firm benefits as compared with a regular brand? Name recognition, more customers, higher price. Higher price is one thing. All other things being equal, a branded product of the same quality will be more expensive than a non-branded one. You know that. Why? No name yogurt in Walmart or whatever is always cheaper than Chobani, for example. Because when you buy Chobani, you know exactly what it is. You know exactly what kind of quality you can expect, by and large. When you buy, what's the standard? Higher price and higher demand, which are kind of connected. Higher demand as compared to a non-branded product. That's the main reason, actually, why the price is higher. So now you can see what is the social function of brands. Social function of brands is to provide stable standards of quality or quality assurance. It takes time and money and cost to create a brand. Brand serves a purpose of offering quality assurance in a market in which it's not easy to assure quality. That's quality assurance. One important point here, it doesn't have to be always an assurance of a high quality. It could be an assurance of a standardized mediocre quality or lower quality. Do you know an example of a brand that is typically considered to offer standardized but nevertheless subpar or lower than average quality?
Ryanair.
Ryanair. So what is Ryanair?
Ryanair is a European flight.
Yeah, low cost.
Yeah.
So you pay 50% less than a regular airfare, but you don't get sandwich. You need to buy a bottle of water. There's no service also on the plane. But it's a brand. McDonald's. So I know maybe I'm subjective, but I think there is at least 20 restaurants in Bismarck that have better food than McDonald's. What is the difference? That you know when you enter McDonald's in Bismarck, North Dakota, it will be the same kind of food as in New York, as in Canada, as in Serbia, as in Tajikistan, as in Russia, as in Sweden. That's a useful thing. So it's a relatively low level of quality in the food industry, but it's a standard and stable and predictable level of quality. So you see, brands could could guarantee or could assure you about high quality? BMW. No. Italian cars or brands, because you know that's you buy Japanese cars. Toyota never breaks. You know, there's a commercial that somebody the catch the plot is that somebody tries to convince somebody else that he was late because his Toyota broke on the road. I know you're lying because Toyota never breaks. So it takes a lot to develop a reputation of that kind. And then people are going Toyota much more than, let's say, American or other cars. So it could be that. The best sports cars is Ferrari. But also you have Volkswagen. You know what Volkswagen means. Hitler was established that firm in 1930s. People's car. Even nowadays, well, I'm a Volkswagen driver, by the way. But Volkswagen is not as good as Toyota. Everybody knows that. It's a brand. If you want to buy a particular kind of car in that range, Volkswagen is a brand because you know what you're buying. So brands are universal. All categories of quality, from the top level products to the lower level products. What they do is they don't increase quality, they offer assurance of standardized, predictable quality, which is a very useful economic good. Why? Because of our imperfect information about things. So we want everything that reduces our information uncertainty about the quality of the product is a useful economic good that deserves to be compensated. You go to Tajikistan and you are facing a choice between 5 similarly looking cans of pop soda. 4 of them you don't know what it is, some strange Russian characters, and the 4th one is Pepsi. Which one are you going to buy? Maybe one of these remaining 4 could be much better than Pepsi, but you know that you're not going to get poisoned by Pepsi. That's kind of silly and extreme example, but you can think of any number of examples like that. So that's the primary function of brands, to reduce our information gap or uncertainty about the quality of the product. Franchises or franchises, I should say. I always got spooked by this inconsistency of English spelling and pronunciation. In many cases, actually, you can pick and choose, actually, I or E. How do you pronounce this? Franchises or franchises?
Franchises.
Franchises. So that's the American. Either or. I always say either or. I think American is either or and British is either or. Although I hear people in here. Oh, the difficulties of native Slavic language speakers to deal with intricacies of. Okay, so franchises. It sounds similar to me as a French fries. French fries is something weird in pronouncing it that way. So what are franchises? French fries. Is there any relationship between brands and franchises?
It's like when you start a store, you buy pretty much the name, or you buy.
Yeah, you buy the name. You buy the right to use the name in your store. What is in there for you? Why would you be paying money to use a certain name?
The brand's back.
You know how it's
Free advertising.
free advertising. What else? Higher demand. You buy the McDonald's franchise. Everybody knows about McDonald's. Your revenue is going to go up. If you Joe Schmo's food truck or restaurants, demand will be low. By the way, you know who is one of the most successful businessmen in the franchise business the United States. He earned millions and tens of millions of dollars in franchise business. That's a very good example. Any ideas? It's a very famous person. Extremely famous. President of the United States. So you know what he would do? He would say, you want to build a Trump Tower in Toronto, Canada, or Tajikistan, or Russia, wherever. You invest the money. And you can use Trump Tower brand, but you have to pay me a fee. 20 million, 30 million, 40 million. That's a classic example. He's doing the business. The source of large part of his revenue is a franchise royalty fees. Why would anyone pay? Why would anyone pay Donald Trump $50 million to put his name on a building? Celebrity, yeah.
That's because it's like a luxurious.
Yeah, luxury, everybody knows. He has a reputation for building luxury real estate, and he's a kind of celebrity, American celebrity with extremely high name, even before he became a president. So you can imagine if he loses the election tomorrow, his business is not going to suffer. His franchising business is not going to suffer. You're cashing in on your name recognition. An apartment in a building that holds the name Trump Tower could be sold at a higher price than some other generic name without name. Okay, so there is a connection between brands and franchises. Franchises are business arrangements whereby the holder of the brand expands the reach of his own or her own market by using production and investment by other agents. It lends its name or his or her name to somebody else who then invests money and produces goods and services under the brand name of that particular person. You can say it's an extreme form of branding, an extreme case of brand. So it's mutually advantageous. It's advantageous for the franchisor. Franchisor is a person who is the owner of the brand. Donald Trump, McDonald's, whatever. And franchisee is the person who is buying the rights to use the brand name. So it's useful for franchisor because it increases his revenue. So Donald Trump is better off by somebody in some Russian or Tajikistani billionaires building a Trump Tower in Toronto than without it. And Tajikistani and Russian and whatever Norwegian billionaires are better off because they can sell a Trump Tower in Toronto at higher price per unit than without that name. So you can apply the same logic for everything else. McDonald's, for example. It's mutually advantageous. Now, what could be the problem here with the model of franchising business? Opportunistic behavior. So now imagine, go ahead. No.
They could probably you mess up your brand name,
Yeah.
like if you're really stupid.
So it's risky. So they can mess up your brand name. I'm a McDonald's CEO, and I give you the right to run your own restaurant under the McDonald's brand name, and you screw up, you start selling crappy food, and you poison somebody. That's a problem for me then, because my brand name is tarnished. It's very difficult to build a reputation. It's really easy to lose it. So reputation, it's a very high currency. It's a very precious commodity in business. So then it's risky behavior. Then if you want to minimize the risk, farther you spread your brand, your costs of monitoring the performance increase. So now what you need to do, you need to send inspectors and to monitor every single store, every single franchise restaurant, so that's extremely costly. Now, is there anything else that the franchisor can do apart from strengthen monitoring and control to assure the high quality performance, standard performance by a franchisee? Are there any other mechanisms that you know of? There's one interesting analogy here. In a modern corporation, in a week or two, we will be talking more about the corporation. But just one thing that you probably heard about. What is the mechanism? How shareholders or stockholders sometimes discipline and motivate managers to work for the firm, to create value for the stockholders. So managers are hired employees. So why would they work to increase the value of shares, the value of stock for the stockholders rather than for themselves? Whatever happens, they have a fixed salary. Or why would they pay any attention? Why would they work hard to create profit? There are many reasons why would they do so, but one of the very important ones is that typically corporations would offer something called share options. So which means that a manager or top level manager or CEO can buy at preferable prices, very low discounted prices, shares in the company. Or even they would offer shares for free, certain number of shares, significant number of shares for free to managers. So what is the reasoning behind this?
The managers have the shares, so
they have a stake. So they're now working directly for themselves, not only indirectly for shareholders. If they work well and the company performs well and the share price increases on the stock market, they're getting wealthier directly. So then the compensation packages typically include maybe 60-70% of what the managers earn are actually in shares. 40% in fixed compensation, fixed salary. So something similar could be done in the relationship between the franchisee. You see, another opportunistic problem of opportunistic behavior, which is solved or minimized. How? By giving a stake to the agent that has the opportunity to behave in an opportunistic fashion. So here, what the franchisee has to do, one mechanism is they need to invest significant amount of money. So you're required to invest, to pay, essentially. If you want to open up a restaurant, you need to make a large investment. So this then reduces the risk of them screwing up the business because they have a stake. Or alternatively, the franchisor can force a franchisee to pay a high royalty fee upfront. That's Donald Trump example is an example of that. High royalty fee, and then as they perform, then the franchisor may pay extra profit to the franchisee. So you open up a McDonald's restaurant in Bismarck, and you pay me a high royalty fee. I'm the owner of the franchise, I'm the owner of the brand. And then you start doing business and you earn profit. If you're doing well, if I'm satisfied with your performance, I'm paying you additional extra profit. So this upfront, on the one hand, high cost of entry, you need really to pay up front if you're interested in getting a franchise, and then opportunity to earn extra profit later on. Both of these function as indirect controlling mechanism by giving you a stake in the survival of the brand, giving you a stake, giving you a personal interest in not harming the brand, in doing everything you can not to harm the brand. First, you pay a huge amount of money up front. You don't want to be losing your revenue. If you don't work well, I'm going to cancel your franchise. So you lose your money, and then you lose the opportunity to be rewarded for successful performance later on. Essentially, kind of similar or indirectly similar to this hostage-taking situation, actually, that we discussed last time. Yes, you can screw up my business, but you're gonna suffer economically, dramatically. So, and on the other hand, you're gonna forego significant profit opportunities in the future as well. Any questions thus far? Comments? Okay, advertising. What is the purpose of advertising? We've discussed this. Stable prices in advertising we already covered to some degree. What is the purpose of advertising? Or what are the purposes of advertising? Okay.
People know about your product.
Yeah, so first, making the existence of your product known. What else?
Yeah, what he said, awareness.
So the awareness of the product, that's one important thing. Information constraints, again. People may not know about your product and you have something useful to sell them. If they had known about your product, they would have bought. What else? Second, maybe equally important one.
It's good quality. Or
Yeah, but advertising is a promise. It's not the assurance of quality. You can advertise your lower price, maybe. Assuming indirectly that people don't simply realize that probably it's a slightly lower quality, but if they're not primarily concerned with quality, they may buy cheaper stuff. What else? Remember, price searcher for differentiation. Why would I buy your own particular product, rather your own toothpaste, not some other toothpaste? So you need to differentiate your product from other similar products, and advertising is one of the techniques in doing so. Simply telling people, I'm different and this is how I'm different and better than anybody else. Have you ever heard criticisms of advertising? And if so, what they are? What are they? That firms are maybe advertising too much.
Like those that have, it's like when you're trying to watch a video or something, like on YouTube.
Oh yeah, I'm trying. If anyone, by the way, if anyone knows how to eliminate advertising on YouTube, please tell me. I'm gonna give you one extra credit. I'm joking. So that's very okay. What else? Do you see these?
I don't know, would prospects and sale leads be considered awareness, or is that even answering this?
The prospects of sales. How do you mean?
For advertising.
For advertising, so they may increase the prospects of sales, or maybe not.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
to
a kind of
further
phase.
to further your expansion of your product and image.
Or why would that be a bad thing? If advertising improves your sales prospect, why would that be a
Pretty bad.
Why would that be a criticism? I'm asking you, have you heard about any kinds of criticisms of advertising? This is one of them.
it's costly.
It's costly. Yeah. Why is that bad? Why is that it could be considered antisocial or inefficient?
It's a waste of money.
Waste of money that you could have used to improve the product. You are spending millions and billions in advertising the product that you could have used to improve the product. So it's anti-consumer. So many consumer advocates believe that advertising is bad because it opportunity cost of advertising. That's the money that they spend on advertising that they could have spent on improving the product. What do you think about this theory that firms are creating artificially needs and demand for their product. The function of advertising is to create insatiable need and demand for the product. We produce something and then we use advertising to convince you that that's exactly what you need. Kind of to force you indirectly to buy our products. To brainwash the public in order to convince that you really need that new plasma TV or whatever. What do you think of that argument? Do you buy it? Do you buy it? That's a very, very, let's say, very widespread type of criticism. It's mostly sociologists and philosophers are responsible. Economists do not subscribe very much to it, or much less than other people. So this advertising is creating artificial needs for products. We don't need so much consumerism. If people were left alone, they would be buying much less, but that's bad for corporate fat cats who need more money to suck all the economic blood from us to take our money away, so they need to convince us to consume.
You can also, advertising, to get to that point, can also be, depending on the example, but it can also be unethical because how they obtain it. You know, like Google, like they already watch the emails, find keywords, and think, oh, we'll show you this ad.
Mm-hmm.
So how they obtain, how they know who to advertise to.
Mm-hmm. So the privacy concerns in modern times, that advertising might be bad or problematic because it involves the technical procedures that may reveal identity of people who may want to remain anonymous. The privacy concerns, that's something. The question, going back to this problem of their convincing us or brainwashing us into buying certain products, there is one problem with that reasoning. That is when you look how much corporations spend in order to figure out what we want. That's billions of dollars. Market research, you know, how much corporations spend, and surveying what consumers would be likely to buy. It's a huge amount of money that they spend. Polling firms, like you might think that polling firms are doing election polling, that's their main source of income. And you would be wrong. That's once in a blue moon, every 2 years or 4 years. Sometimes most of their revenue comes from corporations paying them to poll general public or certain segment of population to figure out whether this or that product will be sold, whether like middle-aged women would buy this or that type of cosmetics, whether young men would buy this or that type of car, and so on. Then expenditure on market research shows you that this probably is not true, because if they had this ability to brainwash us into buying everything they produce, why on earth would they be spending tens of billions of dollars in trying to figure out what we want? If they have this tremendous power to shape our preferences, to convince us what to buy, why would they be wasting their money in trying to figure out what we want? It's market research. So no, advertising is not a brainwashing of the population to buy things. It's just a mechanism of differentiating your product and making the existence of your product well known. Stable prices. What is the function of stable prices, and why the existence of stable prices is something that is not to be expected when we start from a conventional economic theory. One of the main lessons that we do on our market supply and demand and price analysis was that we have here a demand curve and supply curve. And one of the main lessons was that the market is tremendously efficient in clearing surpluses and shortages, creating market equilibrium. What's market equilibrium? Supply equals demand. Market, I repeated probably 5 or 6 times at least, that market is, if left to its own devices, if the government doesn't interfere, markets are extremely efficient in eliminating shortages and surpluses, creating market equilibrium. So if quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, you will have this, that's called shortage. You will have this process of price increasing gradually, quantity demand shrinking and supply increasing until they reach the equilibrium point. So this process is usually very quick, very fast and efficient in the market. And vice versa, if you have a surplus, if quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, the opposite will happen, the price will go down. So then market equilibrium is just a temporary snapshot. It's a situation where nothing happens, but we know that many things happen in reality. So what you would expect to see in reality, starting from this model, supply and demand model, is that the prices will be fluctuating up and down very, very frequently, all the time, but always going back to the equilibrium level, whatever the equilibrium level is. So maybe you would expect, your expectation for the real economic system based on this model would be that every market would conform by and large to the model of stock market, that all prices would behave in a kind of similar fashion that the stock prices behave, which means they go up and down all the time. So you ever watched CNN or Fox News and you have Dow Jones on the screen and it goes up and down 1%, 2%. It changes every second, every 5 seconds the numbers change. As people make trades, the share prices of all companies go up and down, and then the index that averages them goes up and down. So that's a classic example for a very efficient market that adjusts instantaneously in real time. And yet, so that's a prediction if all other things are equal. You would have expect every single market that exists in the world to behave in such a fashion. But we know that that's not the way how markets behave. We know that the price of gasoline doesn't change so much, but it changes maybe more than the price of bread and milk. You know that most retail articles have a relatively stable prices. They don't change from one day to another. But the conditions of supply and demand, there is no difference between the factors influencing the price of bread and factors influencing the share price of Johnson & Johnson, Ford Motor Company. And yet, shares of Johnson & Johnson and Ford fluctuate widely from day to day, and the price of bread in retail stores remains stable. Why? What do you think? Is that the proof of market inefficiency? Is not only most markets are imperfect somehow, inefficient, since they do not fluctuate to account for the changes in supply and demand schedules as often, as frequently as we would have expected them to do. What could be the reasons that some prices could be more stable than others? Are there any reasons of economic efficiency that might prompt such a thing? We mentioned this, one of the factors we discussed at the beginning in one of the previous lessons. So imagine if the process of changing prices every day have higher costs than the benefits that you can earn by increasing price. So one of the reasons why you would like to have, as a seller of some good, more flexibility in changing prices is that you can react more quickly to changes in the demand and charge higher prices if the demand increases. So if you're selling bread and milk, you're a retail store, you would profit because demand fluctuates. If the demand today increases to some degree, you will have the opportunity to earn higher profit by charging 5% higher prices and then 3% lower price tomorrow if the demand goes down. Now you don't do that. And the reason for that is actually that the process of changing prices every single day for every single article is probably 10 times more costly than the benefit of earning higher profit by charging slightly higher price. So you imagine that you need to change barcodes or stickers for every single product every single day. How many more people you would need to hire, how more expensive technology you get in order to allow you to do so. So that means that the opportunity cost of having correct prices sometimes might be too high. So paradoxically, sometimes charging the wrong prices might be more profitable than trying to charge the true correct prices. If the discovery and the implementation of the new and correct prices is more costly than the losses that you have by charging lower prices. That's opportunity cost of changing prices might be too high, so then it makes more sense for you not to change them. So in economics, so how non-economists usually look at economic problems here is either good or bad option. You have a choice between a good and bad thing. Whereas in economic reality, very often is a lose-lose situation. It's a choice between two bad options, one of which is worse than the other one. And this is one of the examples of that. So you're going to be losing some amount of money because the world is a messy and imperfect place. You're going to be losing either by not charging higher price when you should, or by charging it, but then at the cost, which is even higher than this initial cost. So then stable prices might be the indication that the costs of discovery and implementation of the true correct prices are higher than the losses from charging incorrect prices. But there is one more reason, which is for us more important, that stable and predictable prices are good because people like predictability sometimes. People like stability. So even if you could change technically, if there are no opportunity costs of changing prices, you might decide against it because you create the goodwill of your consumers by charging relatively stable and predictable prices. There is a preference, there is a demand for a certain level of predictability and stability in certain markets. So in the stock market, people gamble with their own money. People try to earn money, so there is not much demand for predictability. That's how you earn money on price spreads, buying cheap, selling dear. So then it shouldn't shock you that the stock markets are not stable because there is a demand for instability. Whereas in retail business, there is a high level of demand for stability. Wages. Why wages are typically fixed, why salaries are fixed. Because both employees and employers prefer them to be such. So why is this a problem? This is a problem because there are some types of economic theory that treat this problem of price rigidity or slow pace at which certain prices change as a problem. But we should be aware that stability and predictability of prices have very good economic reasons to exist. Okay, any final questions? Okay. See you on Wednesday.